صلوات. چل پڑا کربو بلا سے جب حسینی قافلہ، ایک رسن میں پشت عابد اور تباکر کا گلا، سانس بنجر کی طرح محسوس جب ہونے لگی، اپنے بابا جان سے رو کر یہ باکر نے کہا، اے میرے بابا، اے میرے بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. مشکل ہے سفر مر جاؤں گا، مشکل ہے سفر مر جاؤں گا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. اے میرے بابا، اے میرے بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. پڑھنی ہے نماز مظلومی بابا، تو امامت کرتا جا، خود دھوپ بھی ہم پہ روتی ہے، جلتا ہے مصلی رہتی کا. میں شکر کا سجدہ کر لوں ادا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. اے میرے بابا، اے میرے بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. کلثوم سکینہ زینب ہے اور سات رقیہ بی بی ہے، اس ایک رسن میں اے بابا ہر عمر کی زہرا قیدی ہے. گرتی ہے میری اماں فضا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. اے میرے بابا، اے میرے بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. دیکھا نہیں جاتا اے بابا مجھ سے یہ قیامت کا منظر، رکتی ہے کبھی چلتی ہے کبھی، زینب کی بدلتے ہے تیور. یہ شام کو جاتا ہے رستا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. اے میرے بابا، اے میرے بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. گر گر کے جو چلتی ہے زینب، محسوس مجھے بھی ہوتا ہے. سجاد پکارے اے بابا، میرا بھی کلیجہ پتتا ہے، جب سنتا ہوں تیرا نوحہ، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. اے میرے بابا، اے میرے بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. رسی میں گلا ہے باکر کا، تو ہولے ہولے چل بابا. گر تیز چلا تو اے بیٹا بازار ستم آ جائے گا، अगर बीमार चला दुर्रों की अजियत पाएगा। और तेरे लबों पर है बेटा तू हौले हौले चल बाबा। ए मेरे बेटा, मेरे बेटा, रस्सी में गला है बाकर का तू हौले हौले चल बाबा। रस्सी में गला है बाकर का तू हौले हौले चल बाबा। मंजूर अजियत है मुझको बाकर ने तकल्लुम दी सदा। हर काम में तेरी मर्जी है तू जैसा चाहे चल बाबा। मैं अब न कहूँगा ए बाबा तू हौले हौले चल बाबा। ए मेरे बाबा, ए मेरे बाबा, रस्सी में गला है बाकर का तू हौले हौले चल बाबा। रस्सी में गला है बाकर का तू हौले हौले चल बाबा। सलावत।
بنفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight being the night of the Shahadat of Imam Baqir alayhi salatu was salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We find that when we examine the life of the fifth holy Imam, many of us ask the questions, what exactly did he What exactly was his legacy that he left behind for his Shia? What was his heritage that we can today benefit from? When we look at an Imam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is someone who defends and someone who guides and someone who protects the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And so when we look at the lives of the A'immat al-Athar, each and every one of them had specific strategies of how to defend, how to protect, and how to interpret the message of Rasulullah. When we come to the life of, for example, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, we say that his patience was his strategy. When we look at the life of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, we say that his peace treaty with Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan was his strategy of defending the message of Rasulullah. Likewise, Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, what happened in Karbala was his strategy. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, we say in respects to his strategy was through dua and ziyarat. Now the question arises, what exactly did Imam Baqir alayhi salam do? How did he defend the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi? Here the scholars came forward and they said that his name is the answer to this question. The fact that he is known as Al-Baqir tells us how exactly he defended the religion of Islam. How? What's the meaning of Baqir? Baqar means someone who creates a fissure, someone who, in respects to the earth, someone who penetrates into the lands of the earth and he goes very deep. When you go deep enough, you can then extract the jewels that's hidden within the earth. Here, Imam alayhi salam was able to extract knowledge, was able to extract jewels and the fine gems from creating a fissure in knowledge. So, in respects to the ulama that existed in the time of Imam Baqir alayhi salam, he was clearly of a different league altogether. When we look at, for example, the opinions of certain ulama, they say that Imam Baqir was considered to be Ahlul Khilafah. He was definitely considered to be very much qualified to be a caliph. But then again, he wasn't, or the Khilafah wasn't given to him. There are certain scholars who say that there was no one in comparison to him when it came to knowledge, and so on and so forth. All of these different fada'il is something that is accepted between us and our brothers, the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So when we look at the name Al-Baqir is someone who creates a fissure in knowledge and is able to extract the gems of knowledge. In which area? In every area you can imagine. In areas of fiqh, in areas of knowledge, in areas of theology, in areas of, for example, philosophy, in other areas as well. What's beautiful beyond this is when you look at the knowledge of Imam Baqir alayhi salam. Now remember, within our faith, within the religion of Islam, we believe that the A'immat al-Athhar should have been the rightful political leaders of their time. A leader is someone who is able to understand different problems and he's able to find solutions to those problems. This is what a leader does. We have all of these different leadership programs. What do these programs teach us? How to identify certain problems and how to find solutions to those problems. Imam Baqir alayhi salam, yes, he wasn't considered to be a formal leader of the time. That was in the hands of the Bani Umayyah. Imam Baqir, although he was the leader chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was able to identify certain problems in his time and he was able to find certain solutions to those problems. And many of these problems changed based on the different circumstances. So in tonight's discussion, I want to speak about the three problems that he saw that were prevalent in his time and the solutions to those three problems. The first was in the areas of knowledge, in the areas of theology, in the areas of the general perception of the religion of Islam. What were the issues and how did the Imam respond to these issues? Number two, in the areas of politics, what were the different political problems of the time and how did the Imam find solutions to these political problems? And number three, the economical problems that existed in the time and the solutions of the Imam towards the economical problems. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. When we speak about knowledge, when we speak about the different sciences that existed in the time of the fifth holy Imam, we find that the Bani Umayyah, as a leading family within the Muslim empire, they did not care about when it came to the different theories and different aspects with regards to the religion of Islam. In fact, when the expansions began to happen, when the neighboring empires were now coming towards the religion of Islam, many of them came with their own teachings. Many, for example, within the Muslim empire were paid to fabricate many different ahadith. When it came to preserving the true knowledge of Rasulullah, they had no care for this whatsoever. So many different theories were now coming forward and were being created amongst the people themselves. When the Imam alayhi salam saw that many different factions and many different sects are now popping up everywhere, the Imam made sure that he was standing in the front lines defending the true message of Rasulullah. So for example, the first sect that appeared in his time and even before his time were known as the Mujbira or the Mufawwidha. These were individuals who believed that Allah is in control of your actions. Again, the proponents of this theory, they were in support of the Bani Umayyah. In fact, when the holy lady Zainab al-Kubra, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, enters the courthouse of Ibn Ziyad, Ibn Ziyad turns to his ministers and he says, "Who is that woman sitting amongst the congregation?" They said, "That's Zainab." He turns to Zainab, he says, "Ya Zainab, tell me, how do you feel of the fact that Allah has made us oppress you in such a way, not oppress you, but mitigate this form of behavior towards you? How do you feel about Allah's actions towards you?" Upon which she gives her response. So you find that in this area, the Bani Umayyah, at the time of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, believed in the idea that Allah is in control of our actions. This was a lie that was presented to the people to kind of shut the people up, especially if they had certain problems towards the Bani Umayyah. They turned towards them And they said to the people that we are not in charge of our actions. In fact, Allah has chosen this for you. Allah has allowed us to behave with you in such a way. With regards to the Mufawwidha, you find Imam Baqir alayhi salam would constantly come forward and he would say that Allah does not manipulate our actions. Allah does not control our actions, especially when we do good deeds. Because if that's the case, then why do we deserve reward? We don't deserve reward if we are forced to perform in certain good deeds. Likewise, when we commit sins, why should we deserve punishment? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has controlled our actions and forced us to commit sins. So when it came to the Mufawwidha, those who believe that Allah controls our actions, the Imam was in the front lines defending the true message of Islam. Then you had the Murji'ah. The Murji'ah are those who used to come forward, and it's a political sect that was established by the Bani Umayyah. The Murji'ah believed that no one should be judged based on their actions. Rather, that judgment should be left in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As long as the person is a Muslim, a person submits to the religion of Islam, whether he prays or not, whether he commits the heinous of crimes or not, whether, for example, he is a fasiq amongst the people in his community, that doesn't matter. We can't judge his religiosity because that judgment is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. These came forward, the Murji'ah, they came forward, and this was a sect that was established by the Bani Umayyah. Again, the Bani Umayyah on the one hand are committing the heinous of crimes. They're going around massacring. There's a lot of bloodshed within the Muslim Ummah. The Murji'ah came forward and said, no, we can't judge the Bani Umayyah. They slaughter, they kill, they don't pray, they don't engage in many of the different ibadats, but we cannot judge their actions based on the belief that they have. That judgment is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many of these Murji'ahs, many of these scholars of the Murji'ah, they were defending the Bani Umayyah, and the Bani Umayyah were financially rewarding them as well. When they came towards Imam Baqir alayhi salam, there was a heated discussion that took place between him and the Imam alayhi salam, the leader of the Murji'ah. The leader of the Murji'ah, he comes towards the Imam alayhi salam and he says, Yabna Rasulillah, we do not cut off relationships with people based on the actions that they perform. Rather, this is the responsibility of Allah. Imam Baqir gives him one sentence as a reply. He says, the believers are those who do not fornicate and those who do not steal from others. The believers are those who do not fornicate and those who do not steal. Meaning the Bani Umayyah, they fornicate. Yes, it's part of their lifestyle. Likewise, they steal and they oppress the rights of the Muslims. A believer who believes in akhirah, who believes in the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never find it within himself to act according to the gravest of crimes ascertained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's a difference between how the believer behaves and how the non-believer behaves. And of course, the Bani Umayyah, we know exactly who they are. So when it came to the Murji'ahs, the Imam alayhi salam has a specific style and a strategy towards them. Then you had the Ghulat as well. The Ghulat are those who exaggerated the position of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. There was one famous Ghulat who went by the name of Mughira ibn Sa'id al-Ajali. Now Mughira ibn Sa'id al-Ajali, this person was specifically, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam gave la'na to this person, likewise Imam Baqir alayhi salam. La'na be upon Mughira ibn Sa'id al-Ajali. Why? Because they have exaggerated, this person has exaggerated our position. Now Mughira ibn Sa'id al-Ajali, they say that he got hold of the books of the companions of Imam Baqir alayhi salam. Now in the time of Imam Baqir, he establishes the Islamic institution. There are many people who attend his lectures, they eventually become scholars. They sit down with the Imam alayhi salam, they record his ahadith. Then they say that some of the companions of Imam Baqir alayhi salam were also the companions of Mughira ibn Sa'id. They somehow disguised themselves as the companions of Imam Baqir alayhi salam. When they got hold of these ahadith, they brought these books to Mughira ibn Sa'id. Mughira then sat down and he began to insert many of these different ahadith. Many ahadith that exaggerated the position of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. Then he came back towards his companions, he said, now distribute this towards the Shia. When the Shia got hold of these ahadith, they came across many of these ahadith which were not mentioned by the Imam alayhi salam. When they saw that these ahadith have been mentioned within the books of the companions, they saw that Mughira has added many of these ahadith. Then they came towards Imam Baqir alayhi salam and they said, we've got a situation. Many of these ahadith you've not mentioned, but they're circulating or they're being circulated amongst the companions. The Imam alayhi salam says, the problem is Mughira ibn Sa'id al-Ajali. La'anna be upon him, because he has deviant beliefs and he has exaggerated our position. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam in a beautiful narration, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam in a beautiful narration, he says, may Allah's la'na be upon Mughira ibn Sa'id al-Ajali. Why? He says, and may Allah's la'na be upon the Jewish woman that he used to sit with. Why? They say because Mughira learned black magic from this Jewish woman. And he used to deceive a lot of people in his time because of the magic that he learned. Not only that, but he says that he exaggerated our positions. He concocted many lies and fabrications against us. Wallah, by God, we are. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Thank you. He says, Wallah, we are servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We eat and we drink. We will die and we will be raised again one day. We will be reckoned from our graves by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Baqir, when he speaks about the ghullat, he says, as far as the ghullat are concerned, do not speak of us in a way that Allah has not spoken of us. Do not describe us in a way that Allah has not described us. And do not raise us in a position above what Allah has given us in stature and fadila. So this was a strike warning, a very strict warning towards the ghullat that existed in the time. Beyond this, you find that when it comes to certain sects, the Imam alayhi salam, Al-Baqir salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, was very strict when he began to interact with these certain individuals. The second way in which the Imam defended the true message of Rasulullah was through public debates. There were times when the Imam alayhi salam used to have public debates with certain personalities. You find people used to come from far and wide towards the city of Medina. And when they would hear about the knowledge of Al-Baqir alayhi salam, they would come and they would meet him. The scholars I'm talking about. You had, for example, the likes of Qatada ibn Da'amat al-Basri. Qatada, according to some Sunni scholars, they say he was one of the greatest fuqaha of the time. But when he came towards Imam Baqir alayhi salam, the famous narration that we've spoken of before, he enters the presence of the Imam alayhi salam. When he enters the presence of the Imam, he has a number of fiqh questions he asks the Imam answers. And then towards the end, after hearing the answers of the Imam alayhi salam, he remains silent. And the narration says, فَسَكِتَ تَوِيلًا. He remained silent for a very long time. Why? He says, because his heart began to tremble. The Imam alayhi salam says to Qatada, he says, Ya Qatada, you're supposed to be a scholar amongst the scholars of Basra. Why is it that you're silent? He says, Wallah, I have sat with so many scholars, but none like you. He says, why? He says, because when I sit in your presence, my heart shakes, my heart trembles. I can't stop myself. The flow of adrenaline was quite severe for this person that he began to shake. So here you find the likes of Qatada, he was belittled and humiliated in front of Imam Baqir alayhi salam. Imam says to him, do you know why you shake? He says, why? He says, because this is the house that Allah has raised. And this is the house that upon which the walls recite the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then you had, for example, the likes of Nafi' ibn Azraq. Nafi' ibn Azraq was a Kharij, one of the leaders of the Khawarij. Again, when he sits down with Imam Baqir alayhi salam, the Imam gives him information that he has never heard of before with regards to the relationship between Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Then you had the likes of the Syrian priest. When Hisham ibn Abdul Malik calls Imam Baqir alayhi salam from the city of Medina towards Sham, the Imam goes towards the city of Sham. When this Christian priest is walking in the streets of Sham, he sees that there is a congregation. When he comes towards this congregation, he says, why have you congregated? He says, because there is an alim from amongst the ulama who has come from the city of Medina. The Christian priest, he comes towards the Imam alayhi salam and is very intrigued to meet him. He's met many scholars amongst the Muslim Ummah, and this is another one that he has the privilege to have an interaction with. He sits down with Imam Baqir alayhi salam. He says, I have met many Muslim ulama and none have been able to answer these questions for me. Will you be the one who answers this question? The Imam alayhi salam says, ask your questions. He says, tell me, are you from from the ulama or are you from the ignorant ones? The Imam replies humbly. The Imam replies, I am not from the ignorant ones. I am not from the juhala. He says, okay, fine. My first question for you is, there is a time during the day within the 24 hours which is not considered to be day, nor is it considered to be night. What part of the day is this? The Imam alayhi salam says, this is the hour after Tulu al-Fajr and between Tulu al-Shams. So Tulu al-Fajr and Tulu al-Shams, this part is not considered to be the day and the night. This is when the sick find cure. This is when the people who cannot sleep find sleep in there during the day. Then he says to him, he says, I thought you said that you are not from the ulama. The Imam replies, he says, I said that I am not from the ignorant ones. He says, I have a second question for you. He says, what is it? He says that you say, you Muslims believe that you will enter the kingdom of heaven. He says, yes. He says, and you will eat and you will drink without excreting. There won't be any waste product. How can this be when you're constantly eating and drinking? When there's input, there has to be output, right? But there's only input here. How is that even the case? The Imam alayhi salam responds, he says, we see this in dunya. We see an example of this in the earth. He says, give me proof for this. The Imam alayhi salam responds, he says, the fetus in the womb of its mother, it eats and eats and eats, but it does not excrete. There is no waste product for the fetus in the womb of the mother. Again, the Christian priest says to him, I thought you said you're not from the ulama. The Imam responds, he says, I said to you, I'm not from the ignorant ones. He says, my third question for you is, tell me. He says, tell me, there are two brothers in history, two twins, they were born on the same day and they died on the same day of the same year. Except one died at the age of 50 and the other died at the age of 150. How is that even possible? Upon which Imam Baqir alayhi salam responds, he says, this is the story of Nabi Uzair in the Holy Quran. When Uzair in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah explains that when he walked past a civilization that had been killed, he saw the bones of the people. And then he turned to Allah, he said, Ya Allah, how will you revive this dead? It's a thought that comes into the minds of the prophets of Allah. With regards to the magnitude and the power of Allah, how will you revive the bones of the people back to how they were originally? Upon which Allah causes him to die. Allah then revives him 100 years later. He was taken at the age of 25. Remember, he has a twin brother who is also 25. Allah revives him 100 years later. His brother continues to live. His brother is 125 and he is still 25 years of age. They carry on living. They live for the next 25 years. He dies at the age of 50 and his brother dies at the age of 150. Again, they say the scholar, this Christian priest, he was angered at first when he heard the answers of Imam Baqir alayhi salam. And then he says to the Imam, Wallah, I will see you next year. In the sense that he would come up with more questions so that he could try and test the Imam alayhi salam again and to show that he was far superior than the Imam alayhi salam. But then he also admits, he says, I have never seen scholars who have been able to answer these questions except you as a person. So you found that when it comes to public debates, again, the Imam alayhi salam always took the opportunity to defend the rightful Islam, the Islam of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Then finally, how does the Imam defend the message of Rasulullah? Through emphasizing the power of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. The Imam took every opportunity to come towards his companions and his people and say to them, you will not find knowledge that comes from the east or the west except what comes from us, the Ahlul Bayt. You can go as far and wide as you want, but you will never find pure knowledge except what comes from us. Likewise, Imam Husayn alayhi salam on the day of Ashura, he says these same words to the people, to the Kufans. He says, turn to the east and the west, you will never find a person like me. There is a difference between the Ahlul Bayt and those who are not from the Ahlul Bayt. Inni tarikum fikum al-thaqalain kitab Allahi wa itrati Ahlul Bayt. Ma in tamassaktum bihima. If you hold on to these two, the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt, فَلَن تَذِلُّوا بَعْدِ أَبَدًا. You will never be led astray. Today, in this day and age, there are many different opinions that are being thrown around. Yes? Opinions in different areas, in different topics. How do we know what's closer to the truth? Try and find things which are closer to the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Whatever is closer or in par with the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, that is exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. Imam alayhi salam, one of the biggest problems of his time was that people were coming forward, scholars were coming forward, and they were giving opinions with regards to the Quran and the tafsir of the Holy Quran based on their own opinions. The tafsir bil-ra'i was something prevalent in the time of Imam Baqir alayhi salam. He would come forward and he would say, Man aftan nasa bighayri ilmin wa hudan min Allah. The one who gives a fatwa without knowledge or without guidance from Allah, la'anatuh. The mala'ikat al-rahma wal-'adhab, the malaika who are in charge of blessings and giving thawab, and the malaika who are in charge of punishing, all of them give la'na on this person. Today, I don't know if you know about this, but today there's a problem amongst the Salafis. It's quite fresh as well. What do they say? The Salafis have come forward and they've said that football is haram. Football is categorically considered to be haram. When they were asked why, he said, when you look at football, it's a man-made sport. It's a man-made game. Within this man-made game, there are man-made laws. How can you have man-made laws when you have the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You cannot have man-made laws alongside the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, football is considered to be haram. Likewise, the second evidence they provide, they say, well, look, in football, when one player tackles another, let's say, for example, he breaks a bone, he breaks an ankle, whatever it is. There has to be qisas according to the laws of Islam. But there's no qisas when it comes to football. The person gets a red card, he's sent off pitch. But within the religion of Islam, there has to be qisas, an ankle for an ankle, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Therefore, based on this, categorically, football is haram. Imam Baqir alayhi salam says, Man aftan nas bi ghayri ilmin wa hudan min Allah. The one who gives fatwa without knowledge and without consideration to the needs of the people, without guidance from Allah, the la'na of the malaika is on them. As in, this moves the people away from the religion of Islam then rather than bringing them towards the religion of Islam. This creates hatred and animosity towards the message of Rasulullah when you start nitpicking the different lifestyles of the people. So you found here the Imam alayhi salam begins to defend the message of Rasulullah by demonstrating knowledge. That's why he was known as Baqir. The second area in terms of politics. When you look at the history of the Bani Umayyah were notorious for their crimes. They were notorious for their aggression. They were notorious for their bloodthirsty nature, especially when it came towards the Shias of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. How does the Imam alayhi salam combat and fight against many of the strategies employed by the Bani Umayyah? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. A few strategies were employed by the Imam. Number one, Amr bil Ma'aruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. He came towards his people and he said to them, you will not receive guidance from the top. Do not resort to the hukuma for guidance, government for guidance. You yourselves create a support system between yourselves. If there is no guidance coming from up there, make sure that you support one another. Amr bil Ma'aruf wa Nahy anil Munkar creates liberation within the heart of the human being. The human being liberates himself physically, spiritually. A human being is attracted towards the devotion of Allah and repels the different sins in his life. When people enjoin the good and they forbid the evil, this allows them to be free individuals in this world. We would rather be slaves of Allah than be slaves of our own desires. He would come forward in front of the people, in front of his companions, and he would say to them that Amr bil Ma'aruf wa Nahy anil Munkar is so powerful that this was the manhaj of the Salihin. This was the way of life of the Anbiya that have come before us and the righteous that have come before us. Through it, it is the Faridatul Azima. It is the greatest of obligation that all the other obligations are based upon. It protects the madhab. It protects the spirituality of the person. Then he would come forward and he would say that Allah revealed to Nabi Shu'aib. He says to Nabi Shu'aib, Ya Shu'aib, I will destroy 100,000 people from your community. 40,000 of them were sinners, fusaq, actively sinning and defying the laws of God. And they couldn't care less about the religion of Islam. But the 60,000 of them, they had a choice. Even them, I will destroy. Nabi Shu'aib says to Allah, Ya Allah, I can understand the 40,000, but why the 60,000? He says, because they couldn't care less. فَأْمَرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَنَهِينَ الْمُنْكَرِ. They had a choice to stand up and speak against the people who committed sins openly, indecency openly. But they chose not to say anything at all. They befriended the sinners, and they did not protect or safeguard the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when it came to Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, Imam Baqir alayhi salam proposed this message, and he was a strong advocate of this. Number two, he began to expose the Bani Umayyah at every given opportunity. He would come forward, and this narration is mentioned in the Sharh of Nahj al-Balagha, Ibn Abd al-Hadid al-Mu'tazili. He comes forward and he quotes the words of Imam Baqir alayhi salam. He says, with regards to the Bani Umayyah, the Imam alayhi salam says that when Muawiyah got hold of the Khilafah, when Muawiyah became the Caliph, you found that there was an aggression towards the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. After the death of Imam al-Hassan, the Shi'as were hunted and they were killed in every city, in every makan. Their hands and their feet were severed. If anyone showed love and admiration towards the Shia, towards the Imam alayhi salam or the Ahl al-Bayt, and you don't have to be a Shia to show love and admiration towards the Ahl al-Bayt, then their assets were seized. They were financially crippled. Their money was taken. Their homes were destroyed. All of this was instigated by the Bani Umayyah. Then he says the situation became even worse. It became worse, and even more aggression was directed towards the Shia at the time of Ibn Ziyad, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. It worsened after Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Then he says it became even worse at the time of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi. Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi, when you hear his history, this person was a killer. All he knew was how to kill and shed blood of the Shia. So you found here the Imam alayhi salam began to expose the Bani Umayyah, each and every single one of them, the hukam of the Bani Umayyah, and how they directed aggression towards the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. Then the Imam alayhi salam begins to speak about the fadila of the Ahl al-Bayt, and he says that true politics should be in the hands of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. He would come forward and he would say to the people that whosoever, and this was a direct attack towards the Bani Umayyah, he would say, whosoever distances themselves from the Ahl al-Bayt, there is no success for them at all. In other words, Imam Baqir alayhi salam came forward and he created a standard of success and failure. And he said that the standard of success and failure is the love of the Ahl al-Bayt or the anger of the Ahl al-Bayt. Whosoever has love, they will see success. The Umayyads, did they have love for the Ahl al-Bayt? Far from it. He said that whosoever has our love, they will see success in dunya. And whosoever has our hatred, they will see nothing but failure. Whosoever has hatred and distances themselves from us, Allah's la'ana will be upon them. Whosoever curses us, Allah's curse will be upon them. Slowly he began to teach the people that the true success that is seen in dunya are those who revolve themselves around the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Then finally the Imam alayhi salam politically changes his strategy depending on the leadership that existed in the time. Now, the time of Imam Baqir alayhi salam was very rocky. You had one caliph after another. At least 5 or 6 different khulafa from the Bani Umayyah came into power and left power. So it was a very erratic political moment in that specific time. The Bani Umayyah were now phasing out, the Bani Abbas were now coming in. So the battle that took place between the two tribes, you could say, created a lot of flexibility for the Imam alayhi salam. But these rulers that were coming in and leaving, each and every one of them had different strategies. Some of them were more cruel than others. So the Imam had to be vigilant. Depending on the ruler of the time, the Imam had to formalize a specific strategy. In the time of, for example, Al-Walid, the Imam had to behave in one way. In the time of Hisham, the Imam had to behave in one specific way. They say that majority of the time the Imam alayhi salam had to employ taqiyya. Taqiyya fi kulli dharura. Taqiyya had to be employed by the Imam alayhi salam. And he emphasized the importance of taqiyya to his companions. In the time of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, for example, Umar bin Abdul Aziz, there was a lot of flexibility in the hands of the Imam alayhi salam. The Imam saw that he could work with Umar. They say one day, beautifully, Umar comes towards the city of Medina. When he comes towards the city of Medina, he makes an announcement, a public announcement. He says, which from amongst you have been oppressed? Anyone who has been oppressed, come towards me. I'll listen to your case and I'll judge accordingly. Umar bin Abdul Aziz, when he made this announcement, Imam Baqir alayhi salam went towards him. When he enters the tent or the place where Umar was, he enters, and Zuham, one of the companions of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, Husayn, he says to Imam Baqir, he says, wait here for a moment, let me go tell Umar that you're here, and then you can go and visit him. When he says that Imam Baqir alayhi salam has come to meet you, Umar bin Abdul Aziz says, bring him in. Call him. The Imam alayhi salam enters the presence of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, and he sees Umar wiping away tears from his eyes. He says, Ya Umar, Imam alayhi salam says to him, Ya Umar, why are you crying? One of the wuzara that were there tells the Imam, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, Umar is crying because of such and such reason. Upon which the Imam alayhi salam begins to admonish Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Why does he admonish him? Because he knows that the character of Umar is such that he is capable of listening. He has some leniency towards the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Even though he is from the family of the Bani Umayyah. He says, Ya Umar, you have to understand this world is like the shops in the bazaar. People come and they buy things, and the reason why they buy things is because they have suffered a great loss. At times people come and buy things so that they can benefit from it. He says, Ya Umar, there are many people in this world, they waste their time. And they realized how much time they wasted until death comes knocking on their door. Then when they leave this world, they die in the state of absolute regret because of the loss that they have suffered. He says, Ya Umar, I admonish you with two things. Accumulate as many good deeds as possible, so that when you leave this world, you have something to take with you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And refrain from sinning. Deter yourself from sinning, so that when you leave this world, there are certain things that you do not take with Allah towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Ya Umar, there are three things. When you enjoin these three things, you will increase your belief in Allah. Umar says, Ya Ibna Rasulullah, tell me, what are these three things? He says, the first thing is that when you are pleased, do not allow your pleasure to make you do haram. Do not let your pleasures be the cause of haram. Number two, when you are angered, do not allow your anger push you towards haram as well. Do not be aggressive towards others. And then he says, Ya Umar, when you are in the state of power, do not allow your power violate the needs of others. When Umar heard this, he says, bring me a pen and paper. He then signs a paper saying that Fadak should now officially return into the hands of Ali Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Politically, the Imam alayhi salam saw problems and he found solutions to these problems. Then economically, the Bani Umayyah, they destroyed the entire economic system within the Muslim empire. Bayt al-Mal became their own piggy bank. They used the Bayt al-Mal to finance themselves and enjoy the different pleasures of this world. Amongst the Bani Umayyah, there are certain Amongst the Bani Umayyah, there were those who used the Bayt al-Mal to eat the lavish of foods and to wear the softest of clothes, to the extent that they had met their needs to such an extent that they would then share this Bayt al-Mal, they would share the finances with their companions and their friends. They would support their neighbors, they would support some of their friends, and so on and so forth. They say the poets of the time, they were an investment for the Bani Umayyah. The Bani Umayyah would enforce poetry, and the musicians specifically in that time. They would come publicly in front of the people and they would support the Bani Umayyah. They would create plays and music and all of these things in support of the Bani Umayyah. And the Bani Umayyah would then support them financially. Today, in this day and age, Hollywood acts as the same. You find if there's a specific agenda that needs to be pushed forward into the mass, into the minds of the people, it happens through what is produced by Hollywood. There's a constant message that every film has for a specific time, until that message is engraved into the minds of the people. So you find that using poets, using singers, this was a powerful investment for the Bani Umayyah. The city of Medina became a central when it came to music. Why did they target the city of Medina? Because they wanted to diminish the spirituality of the city of Medina. This was an attack on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. So you found, sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. With regards to Bayt al-Mal, you see, within the religion of Islam, there's a beautiful concept that when a person has a leadership position, they should take on the responsibility, they should be responsible for distributing the wealth that exists within Bayt al-Mal. This is one of the responsibilities. There's a beautiful story of some of our marajah that I've come across. They say that when a person reaches that stage where he's considered to be a marja, the people will come towards them and they will say to them that you, we believe, should be the next marja or the next marja who should be in line. So if this person was to pass away, we ought and we recommend you to take his position. Many of these marajah, they would turn the other direction. Not because of the power and the prestige. They would say, we do not have any interest in becoming the marajah of the time. Why? You have the knowledge, you have the skill, you have the experience of sharing that knowledge. Why? This is because of khums. I don't want that responsibility in my hands to collect so much khums and to be able to distribute it. Out of fear that I am not able to do justice to the money that comes into my hands. They would walk and they would go the other direction. Today you have people campaigning to become leaders of communities and organizations. One of the responsibilities is the money that comes into your hands and how you distribute that money. It's a heavy responsibility, especially a caliph of that position. Many from amongst the Bani Umayyah use the Bayt al-Mal for their own selfish desires. The Imam alayhi salam comes forward to his people and he says, you will not see help coming from the hukuma, help coming from the government, but you amongst yourselves create a social, create a circle, a support system amongst yourselves. One of the things that the Imam alayhi salam find, the economical solutions that the Imam establishes is the idea of brotherhood. That you and I are all brothers within the community. If there are people in the community who are in need of financial assistance, then we should support them as brothers. Not allow that person to refer and seek help from the government and seek benefits, for example. If there is someone in need, we should collectively help him. We should make that our responsibility. The Imam mentions a beautiful hadith. He says that when a person performs Hajj, that is far beloved to Allah than if this person was to free a slave, and a slave, and a slave, and a slave. And the Imam mentions a slave 70 times. In other words, the Imam says a person who performs Hajj, and this is the season of Hajj, isn't it? He says a person who performs Hajj, it is greater than freeing 70 slaves. But when a person supports a mu'min, and a person who financially meets the needs of a mu'min or a Muslim, that is greater than performing Hajj. And another Hajj, and another Hajj, and another Hajj, and he mentions 70 Hajj. If a person was to financially assist another person within the community, when it comes to, for example, the ideas of oppression, and directing oppression and dhulm on others financially, the Imam alayhi salam comes forward and he says there are 4 things that if a person performs, he will never see 4 things from Allah. Number 1, if a person, financial crimes the Imam is talking about. He says when a person steals from others, when a person cheats others in his business, when a person engages in interest, and when a person, for example, takes away the wealth of others, there are 4 things that Allah will never accept from him. Allah will not accept his sadaqah. Allah will not accept his zakat. Allah will not accept his hajj and his umrah. Hajj and umrah what? Ibadatul maliyah. You have to pay wealth to perform hajj and umrah. Allah will never accept this if you are guilty of financial crimes towards others. Likewise, the Imam comes forward and he says, turn towards the Holy Quran. The Quran speaks about salah and zakat. A person, over 80 times, salah and zakat is mentioned alongside each other. The Imam says if a person performs salah and he establishes salah in his life but does not care for zakat, then salah will never be accepted from him. He says, we have found, Imam Baqir alayhi salam says, we have found in the book of Ali ibn Abi Talib that Rasulullah has said. What has the Prophet said? He says the Prophet has said that when a person prevents himself from, or when a person prevents zakat, the earth will never bear fruits for him. Barakah will never come from the earth. That is if charity is stopped or prevented by that person. Then he begins to speak about the infaq al-wajib, charity which is wajib for each and every one of us. This is with regards to zakat, with regards to khums and so on and so forth. Then he begins to speak about infaq al-mustahab, the idea of giving charity which is considered to be mustahab. Charity which is mustahab is when I go donate to certain charities, when I give money to my brother, when I give money to certain members of the community, for example. Yes, the Imam comes forward, he says, whosoever gives charity, Allah will prolong his life and Allah will increase his rizq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will prevent many diseases from his life. All of these ahadith come from Imam Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. There were economical problems that existed in the Muslim empire, and these were the solutions of the Imam to try and close the gap between the rich and the poor. The hukuma were busy indulging and increasing they were meeting their desires financially, leaving the rest of the people in the state of poverty. But the Imam was now creating a section, or was creating a system amongst the people that they are able to look after themselves. That people create brotherhood amongst themselves to protect themselves from the fears of poverty. Likewise, you find that the Imam alayhi salam in his final moments, Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, he sees that the growing power of Imam alayhi salam is something seen as a threat. He considers it as a threat, and he eventually provides food and drink towards the Imam alayhi salam, which is poisoned. When the Imam alayhi salam consumes this food, the poison enters his body. When it enters his body, it begins to destroy from within. 3 days the Imam alayhi salam was alive. In the final night, he turns to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam and he says to his son, Ya Bunayya, I have left behind some money for you. He says, my father, what is this money for? He says, my son, every year use this money and try and establish the azaa of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. Why so much emphasis on the azaa of Imam Husayn alayhi salam? The reason is because Imam Baqir alayhi salam was there in Karbala. Imam Baqir alayhi salam was there at the age of 3. He was there and he witnessed all of the different atrocities of the Bani Umayyah. In fact, Imam Baqir alayhi salam was part of the journey from the very beginning. When the Imam alayhi salam left the city of Medina and he went towards Mecca, Imam Baqir was there. When he left the city of Mecca to go towards Kufa, Imam Baqir was there. When they came towards Karbala, Imam Baqir was there. Even after Karbala, Imam alayhi salam was dragged towards the cities of Kufa, and he was therefore dragged towards the cities of Sham. Imam Baqir was there alongside his father the entire journey. At-Tabari, when he speaks about Karbala, he takes the accounts of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Imagine what type of a scholar Imam Baqir was, that at the age of 3, what he witnessed at the age of 3 is considered by a scholar like Tabari in his history. Imam Baqir alayhi salam, he narrates, he says, I was there alongside my father and my grandfather on the 10th of Muharram, when I saw the companions executed one after another. And I was there when I saw my grandfather run towards his son Aliyun al-Akbar when he fell from his horse. And when he stood alongside his son, when he cries out, Yunadi, Ya Waladi, Ya Ali, على الدنيا بعدك العفاء وولدا وعليا. Grief-stricken, I heard the voices of my grandfather Abi Abdullah. He says, I was there when I saw my grandfather Abi Abdullah carry a youth by his chest, but because the body of this youth was shredded into pieces, when he carried this youth back towards the tents of the women, his feet were being dragged on the sands of Karbala. I was there when he turned to this youth. He said, Ya Qasim, ma arafu man jadduk wa man abuk. Ya Qasim, they do not know who your father and your grandfather is. He then says, I was there when I saw my uncle Maqtu al-Kaffain Abu Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, when my grandfather stood alongside him, وَيُنَادِي الْآنْ انْكَسَرَ ظَهْرِي. When he stood alongside Abu Fadl al-Abbas, I heard his words. I heard him say, now my back is broken. He says, I was there when I saw my grandfather standing alone in the sands of Karbala, when he cried out, هل من ناصر ينصرنا هل من مغيث يغيثنا. Is there any helper to help us, any aid to aid us? He says, I saw my grandfather when there was no response from anyone. I saw his heart rip apart. Then I saw him come towards the women and he bade farewell towards the women. Imam Bakr, he says, I was there alongside the women when he bade farewell to the women. Then I saw him go towards the sons of Karbala into the battlefield, and I saw him being executed. Then when everything was over, the women and the children and myself, we came towards our father Imam Zain al-Abidin. We said, Mada nasna'na, what do we do? The Imam alayhi salam says, Farru ala wujuhikum fil adaa. He says, run and escape towards the deserts of Karbala, because they've just planted the head of my father on the highest spear. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. If we can recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all.
مظلوم میرے لال حسین آجا میری آغوش میں بے حال حسین مقتل سے بقیہ سے تھی اس وقت میں پہنچی گھوڑوں سے تیری لاش تھی پامال حسین میرے لال حسین میرے لال حسین آجا میری آغوش میں بے حال حسین میرے لال حسین میرے لال حسین اے ہے میرے بیٹے کا بدن خون میں تر ہے اولاد پیمبر کے اجڑنے کی خبر ہے، پوشاک ہے زخموں سے تیری لال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، آجا میری آغوش میں بے حال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال میں ہو گئی برباد، قیامت کی گھڑی ہے، بے گور و کفن رن میں تیری لاش پڑی ہے، غربت میں تیرا ہو گیا کیا حال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، آجا میری آغوش میں بے حال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال حسین، پھٹ جائے نہ صدمے سے کہیں ماں کا کلیجہ، آنکھیں تو ذرا کھول دے، مائی ہے بیٹا، باہوں کو گلے میں تو میرے ڈال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، آجا میری آغوش میں بے حال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال، اولاد نبی لٹ گئی، برباد ہوا گھر، گردن پہ تیری چلتا رہا شنگر کا خنجر، ایک دن میں لٹی رن میں میری آل حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال حسین، آجا میری آغوش میں بے حال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال، نازین پہ لاشا ہے تیرا اور نہ زمین پر، آ جائے میرے لال کے سر زانو پر رکھ کر، باندھوں گی تیرے سر پہ میں رومال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، آجا میری آغوش میں بے حال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، زینب کو ردا تجھ کو کفن بھی نہ ملے گا، غربت پہ تیری روئے گی تا حشر یہ دکھیا، کھولوں گی تیری لاش پہ میں بال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، میرے لال حسینا، آجا میری آغوش میں بے حال حسینا۔